Good evening. I'd like to call to order the discussion meeting of the Board of School Directors. Today is Monday, January 13th, 2020. It is 7:33 p.m. and roll call, please.
Beal.
Here.
Capucci.
Here.
Diamond.
Here.
Fleischer.
Here.
Hackett. Here. Albrecht.
Here.
Reamer.
Here.
Strautmeyer.
Here.
Weiland.
Here.
Okay, action items for tonight's board meeting. Dr. Steinhauer, financial items.
Thank you. And as we traditionally do, we ask Mr. Galecko to go through the financial items.
Certainly. The Treasurer's report reflects cash transactions for the month of December 2019. The report is typical for this time of year, and the superintendent recommends it for approval.
Any questions? Okay, number two.
Number two, the monthly list of bills reflects checks authorized to be drawn between December 5 and December 31, 2019. All checks have been reviewed by the administration and are typical of this time of year. The superintendent recommends approval of this list.
Any questions?
For our board's information, the administration does go through these one by one. We look at some of the bigger ones, even some of the smaller ones, and we really try to make sure that we know exactly, well, Rob knows exactly what each is for, but in case there were any questions from the board. You can also see, we had a discussion in our policy meeting tonight about student activities. So there is a whole page of disbursements from student activities that we oversight, and we keep those in reserve. So.
Fund 81, for anyone
Yes.
interested.
Anyone else? Okay, number three, please.
The list of tax refunds reflects 4 refunds for the month of December totaling $3,583.79. The list has been reviewed by the Solicitor's Office, which recommends approval. The list is recommended for approval by the superintendent.
Any questions? Okay. Moving on.
The list of unusable equipment includes assorted men's and women's theater costumes and an upright piano. The superintendent recommends approval of this list.
Over
Any-
the years, our theater department has collected, anytime anybody wants to get rid of old clothes, they typically give them to the school district, and we've been carrying those for a long time. And we've been begging them to go through and weed out some of those costumes, and here you have bags of stuff, if you'd like to get a bag of.
Do we have a list of the costumes?
Yes.
They're not something that we could turn into pillows or anything for the,
I don't know whoever came up with that pillows talk, but
A $50 piano.
Yes.
number five.
School supplies and equipment solicitations. Annually, the board must approve the district's solicitation for bids on school supplies and equipment for the upcoming school year. Bids will be presented to the board for approval at the May board meeting, pending approval of the budget and verification that bids were within budgeted sums. The superintendent recommends approval of this action.
So this item is us just asking to put stuff out for bid.
Couple, just to add to that, the science department, gym, art, and athletics are probably our biggest bidders.
And this is something we typically do this time of year.
Correct.
Okay. Number six.
Transfer from the general fund to the capital reserve fund for future capital projects. The board will discuss a transfer of $2.4 million from the general fund assigned fund balance to the capital reserve fund for approved capital project lists and the yearly technology and book replacement.
So Rob, why don't you go ahead and explain a little bit about this?
So here I have our financial statements ending June 30th, 19. And we have 2 separate funds there, the general fund and the capital fund, which are the first 2 in the column. In the general fund column, we have an assigned to capital projects number in the general fund, and that reads just shy of $4.6 million. What we're asking the board for is to take $2.4 million from that 4.6 and move it to the capital fund so we can initiate our capital purchases throughout the spring and the summer, which we'll discuss Mr. Marciniak's capital projects list in February. But this is a pretty routine transaction. In years past, recently, we've had some bond refinancing and some projects with borrowed money. That money is now all gone. So now we're using our essentially rainy day fund or our accumulation of fund balance that we've sequestered to capital projects. We're asking to move that over to the capital fund so we can initiate some of those projects.
And this isn't part of the 6% that we're required to keep per board policy, correct?
That is separate from the 6%, which is just shy of $6.2 million.
And would you also just explain, particularly for new folks, that the capital funds, beside the list of capital projects of Mr. Mosiniak, we use that for other purposes? as
Certainly.
well?
So typically, there's a use for three separate sets of projects. Our capital projects, which is our infrastructure, our technology refresh over the summer, and then any book refreshes that we do as far as series for our elementary and secondary kids.
And Mr. Galecko, can you just clarify, because it says for approved capital projects list, but this is actually for future potential projects
so,
that we'll approve
Correct.
at a later date?
During the spring, we'll bring some lists to you that
Actually, next month.
allocates,
Okay.
yeah, next month, between February and May, with a list of projects that we've been working on, and that will be spent from these monies.
But we'd still have to vote on.
Correct. Yes.
And could I ask that you perhaps provide us with, assuming this passes, with the revised balances within each fund?
Absolutely. So like I mentioned before, we have 4.6 million, just shy of $4.6 million allocated. We moved the 2.4 over. We still have $2.2 million left in the capital projects fund in the general fund.
And I think Mr. Beal was also talking about OPEB reserves and
Yes.
any
Yes.
reserves that we have, we'll
Yes.
provide the board with a list on Thursday.
So-
Wouldn't it show up in the financial information that you give us every month?
Certainly, but I'll break down, I'll do an updated fund balance for a snapshot in time in the coming week.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay,
Okay,
moving on to personnel.
Thank you. Find a personnel report here. Found it. The personnel report details personnel appointments, changes in assignments, leaves of absence, resignations, retirements, and most significantly in this personnel report are the 10 sabbaticals that are being presented to the board for improvement. And I also do want to note that Diana Becker, who's one of our guidance counselor, who spent 10 and a half years with us, will be retiring at the end of the school year, and Diana has served us well. So that's the first, Katie, is that the first retirement we've received so far?
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions, comments? Okay. Moving on.
Duplicating and cover stock paper bids. The annual bid for duplicating paper in the amount of $72,732, and for cover stock paper in the amount of $6,358 has been received. The lowest responsible bidder is WB Mason Company Incorporated, and both are within budgeted amounts. I'm recommending the board approve that as the low bid.
Any questions? Okay.
All right, moving on to the discussion portion. We did expect Jim Sauer from JT Sauer to be present with us tonight, but he has the flu. So he sent the carrier, Kevin Lynch, to meet with us. Kevin, what is your title at JT Sauer?
Project manager.
All right, come on up to the podium. We also have John Grogan, our athletic director, with us, and Joel Thompson, our acting principal, and Mr. Marciniak. Why don't you go over with them too? We supplied the board with a couple handouts that were at your table tonight. One is about 4 or 5 page handout with some pictures on it, and you also have a preliminary estimate of probable costs. And we'll let Kevin and Rick kind of describe the project and why we need it, those types of things. Microphone, yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Steinhauer. As Dr. Steinhauer said, I know back in October, I think it was the board who authorized JT Sauer to go ahead and proceed and prepare design documents and bid documents for the replacement of the turf and the track at the stadium. So at this time, Sauer We've been meeting with Mr. Grogan, his coaches, and the administration, and talking about the needs of the district. And Sauer has been going ahead and doing the site design, doing some of the utility work and things like that as far as one calls, and then go ahead and preparing the design and the specifications in the bid documents. So at this time, we're, if the district so desires, we're prepared to go ahead and solicit bids and quotations for this project.
So let's go back a little bit and talk about, we first put this on the capital project list 2 years ago, and it was below the line, which some of the current board members, or veteran board members will know that Rick puts a line what things that we think that we should do this year and things that could potentially hold off, but things that are on your radar. Last year it became a little bit more critical. Board leadership, or the board at that time, decided that we were in the process of replacing the rock pile turf, and we thought there were some delays there because of the weather, as you recall, and it was not something that needed to be done immediately. We were comfortable with getting through another year of repairs, and if you read some of the documentation, J.T. Sauer does note that our facilities department has really taken special care to get that beyond those 2 year, beyond the 8-year lifespan. And from here on out, it's going to be difficult to maintain that field in a quality playing position. Go through some of the challenges that we've faced with that field.
Yes, as you stated, the field was maintained to get you. Turf fields will be typically warranted for 8 years under the manufacturer. After that time, it would be on the owner to take care of any repairs or corrections to that turf. The turf that's existing out there right now is what's called a monofilament turf, which is a single strand of plastic fiber with a hardened spine ridge in it. That was very popular at the time of the installation of this field approximately 10 years ago. What they found over time is being that since that is a single strand of fiber with a rigid spine, it breaks down over time. So looking through the little packet write-up that was provided to the board members, when you look at these images and you kind of see the blue end zone turf, that's what we're talking about by it bending and breaking down. Getting the extra 2 years out of it goes a long way. Currently, it's at a position that if you continue to try and do these repairs yourself, it will just cost more money, and the field will continue exponentially to break down much quicker than it has. Once that occurs, then naturally it becomes safety. Some of the things noticed, there are areas where the turf has been totally gone. If you would come in and do a deep clean compaction, what's it called? They come in and they fluff all the rubber up, they try to get your fibers to stand again. At this point in time, that could do much more damage than good, and potentially just start ripping out chunks of the turf as it is. Some of the seams within the field are starting to have an elevation change, which can cause a tripping hazard. The density in the center logo is starting to get very hard and compacted. Some of the areas are a little uneven. So this becomes a point in time where it's a good time to replace what's out there currently. Along the track, there's marks in some areas that have been repaired and will continue to need to be repaired. To replace the track at this point in time, you're still dealing with a good subbase of asphalt underneath that track surface. What that allows is a simple replacement of the top portion of rubber on your track. So you won't have to go in and do a full pour bituminous pavement to bring it all back up. Allowing the track to continue to deteriorate will only 9 times out of 10 cost you more money in the end. As cracks start opening, it starts ruining that subbase asphalt, which is a much larger cost than where you're currently at now. With the rendering as well, it's a good opportunity to change the color of your track, which is what the back and forth was, decided on that heavier, darker navy blue color with the yellow relay zones to kind of really just continue the theme of your school's colors and presentation throughout the campus. And that got us to the point of then developing what you're seeing on your screen, as well as a full set of construction documents that would be publicly bid to qualified contractors.
The design that Sauer has put together, we have typically for the last 10 years, for the lacrosse and for the field hockey lines, we paint them twice per year and put those lines on. Where this field, you can see, has the lines as we've done on the upper practice field. So those lines would be sewn in now. So we would eliminate that cost.
Is this the same turf as in the upper practice fields was being proposed?
Same level of quality turf. Whether the end company would be the same that wins the bid, that would be decided, but we're using the same level of specification for the turf product for your stadium field as well.
And we still in the 8 to 10 year range here?
Unfortunately, that's what the turf company would warranty it, is typically 8. What we've been doing a lot lately with bids is writing in a line item that you can see a cost for the turf manufacturers themselves to owe you once or twice a year grooming on their own field. Pending the turf companies, it's a minor cost, I guess, overall, the overall scope of things. But it allows that provider to maintain their own product for that full life of your turf. Now, this field was maintained very well, or it probably would have been replaced after 8. That's the way monofilament worked. Now that you get into a combined fiber, slit film and monofilament, so we've been writing those into specs a lot. It helps the owners a lot of times that don't have this level of maintenance, and it's kind of a comfort that you know you're not going to get sold a turf product and never see the provider again. It keeps them coming out here, making sure everything is in good order for your field.
Thank you.
John, could you tell us how many competitive events, athletic, and then I know we have a lot of marching band things out there.
That field, roughly 500, I think we figured out 532 events last year, over 1,500 hours on the turf. And that's just scheduled things. I think everybody that lives in Mount Lebanon knows that field really never stops. So, you know, people are on there even when things aren't scheduled. But scheduled events last year, there was 532 and roughly a little over 1,500 hours.
And we also allow our community to walk on the track. They pretty much walk on it all day long unless there's an event. Even sometimes during events, they're trying to walk the track.
That does not include PE, obviously PE, there's a physical education class that's usually during the day.
Yeah, we use it as a teaching station down there also.
And as far as the track's concerned, there's people, if you're there at 4 o'clock in the morning, there's people there. And when I leave here around 10:15, there's people there. So, I mean, it's used.
Do we know if the synthetic turf we are likely to use will be recyclable?
So the turf that we will be taking out, we have in our bid documentation to recycle. There's currently a facility up around Meadville that has been approved through the DEP to be able to recycle the filling, the crumb rubber, the tiny rubber pellets, and the sand material. They're currently trying to go through to the artificial turf product itself, the actual carpet. They're trying to get that approved right now. So we have in there the language that if they know of a recycling, that's something that's coming up more now, but it's very hard to get it allowed to be recycled as a recycling plant. So currently, I can say for sure that your crumb rubber and sand would be sent to a recycling center. And then language for after the fact of this turf field would then call it for when they take this out to be recycled, if it can be at
Mr.
that
Beal,
time.
I think I saw the same New York Times article about the amount of artificial turf fields that are being put out in
Absolutely.
farmers' fields and things like that, and certainly, yeah, I guess the only recycling plant right now is in France.
Correct.
So you have to put it on a boat and take it over to France to be recycled. But it's our goal to, that's something that we've talked to them about, and that's why they wrote the specifications that recycle what they can, the sand and the crumb rubber, and if it's available, to recycle the grass.
Yeah, in the actual grass panels that'll be coming out, those are called to be sent to an approved DEP facility, so there won't be old turf from your stadium in a farmer's field in the middle of Pennsylvania is where they actually found that, and it was a staggering amount.
And just one more thing, and I'm sure we're comparing apples to oranges here, but I remember we resurfaced, maybe Mr. Marciniak can speak to this, the Jefferson track a few years ago, and I think we got that done for only maybe $250,000 or $300,000. This is, I suppose, a more, just looking at the number, it's more money. I suppose we're getting more track.
Yeah, correct, Mr. Beal. There's more track. What we did over at Jefferson is we did a simple overlay. We went over top of the old track, so we didn't mill any of the rubber up, or we never touched any of the base like that. We simply went over top of the old track. So the scope of work is much different.
Okay.
So why don't we get, Kevin, if you wouldn't mind going through the cost estimation sheet with the board, they have that in front of them, and kind of go through what each section is.
So the cost estimation sheet will be broken down to kind of follow along with the scope of work you're seeing on the rendering up there. These numbers naturally would only be finalized upon a bid, but these are very up-to-date numbers from some of our latest construction projects, as well as people we just kind of try to bounce numbers back and forth off of. So when you start up your site, you have your management mobilization. That is simply the contractor coming onto your site with their equipment to begin work. It's unfortunate, but you always pay that as a line item. And then the construction companies themselves will have an on-site survey and stakeout for the proposed improvements. So we always label that as your site startup portion. Demolitions is simply dealing with everything that we will be removing to be able to put back in your new field and track. Removal of goalposts, the existing turf field with infill, a small portion of fence pretty much to be able to access the site when it's under construction, and then your removal of your rubber surface. The area shown on your rendering where the Devil's Head is, that is the area where we're talking about the removal of bituminous pavement. That's currently paved right now. We're calling for that to be taken out and replaced with a turf product on the Devil Head logo end of your field.
Quick question with that. If it's asphalt now, correct? So will that give more surface area on the track for practice for different teams and sports?
There'll be more turf surface areas from a practice standpoint.
Because I know a lot of times, like the cheerleaders and things will run through and practice their things, and they're kind of squished into little areas when we come through in the summer. And so this will give them another big area in each end zone to practice. Okay.
Subbase?
Yes. Subbase, so subbase is all the stuff that's not very fun for the project, but what makes your field function in the long run. And with this field, we want to try to address a couple slower areas of draining. So the subbase here includes your new drains for the area where we're removing the bituminous surface and putting back in the artificial turf. We have to extend your perimeter drains along the sideline. That takes care of your nailer board. You'll be reattaching to the radius of your track to adhere the turf to. Field collector drains, those are 1 by 12-inch flat panel drains that will run in to your new field collector drains. 4-inch PVC under drains will be coming out from the new proposed second long jump pit and then tapping back into your existing drainage system. From there, we have a couple of Y connections, simple connections, and geotextile fabric for the new portion of turf. Then your synthetic turf field itself is cost out at a square foot. Companies vary in their range. This is pretty good average of those ranges, and along the lines with what we had previously built for your upper practice field. And then that breaks down all of the other package items as far as your sports, soccer package, lacrosse package, football comes included, and then you'll have your field hockey. End zone text is roughly $1,000 a letter. We'll be installing new goalposts that will match the current ones that were just placed for your upper field, tall yellow, very nice presentation. And then the Devil Head logo and center field logo are line items as well. With those, we require the turf manufacturer to provide vector images and checks and balances so the school district can take a look and make sure they are getting the logos they want and they don't ship you someone else's logo or you don't like the logo they produced. From there, the SBR rubber with color zones. So your color zones in your navy blue increase square footage cost here and there. That is simply talking about the wearable surface on top of your existing bituminous base. And then we'll be installing a brand new long jump pit with launch boards and some bituminous repair around the areas we were working for those additions.
So that general subtotal is $852,000. Your next item on there is a 5% contingency, so explain why we would need any contingency for the project.
We like to always include a contingency. You never know what you get until you take the turf off of your field currently. Your field also already has a Brock, or maybe not Brock, but a G-Max base, a rubber layer, E-layer system. Items like that, they are going to have to take precautions, remove all that items before they place your new turf. But we always at least like to carry a 5% contingency just so you could have that budgeted in the event that some of those panels are bad. We have to do more here. A project like this, hopefully you wouldn't use 1% since it's a replacement. But it's best to have a little there in case you need it versus not.
And if you didn't use it, you wouldn't use it. If you didn't need it, you wouldn't use it.
Correct. You put it back in the funds.
Any questions,
Yeah.
comments?
Actually, Mr. Marciniak, when was the last time that there was a deep clean and decompaction done on the field?
Last summer.
Last summer? And as part of that process, was there some of that degradation that you saw?
There is, and every year, after they get done cleaning, they kind of dump the spoils. And we keep seeing that spoil pile has been getting, larger and larger. So the fibers themselves are being pulled out. And in fact, if you go down on the turf, even now, and just walked, you would see that there's lots of fibers just laying on the turf itself. So we keep seeing that there's more and more. It's becoming more and more difficult to deep clean.
And as part of that process, the deep cleaning, that's to keep the
Well, there's all
microbes
types
and
of things.
bacteria and everything. I mean, that's
That's
a health
part
issue.
of it, but just during the normal use of the field, there will be chin straps, there'll be bobby pins, there'll be hair bracelets and things. I mean, there's just a ton of metal and things like that that get down into the fibers, and that pulls all of that out.
Okay. And the decompaction is also for safety, right? To
Yes,
to
that's
bring that
correct.
rubber
It
infill
tries
back up
to fluff
so
it
that it
back
actually
up.
has more shock absorption, so to speak.
That's
So
true.
that's a concern for
We
any
always
player
have
on
an
the field.
independent firm do that. And
Yeah.
they brought it to our attention that the field is beyond its useful life. It's coming to the end of its useful life also.
Can I ask, also, I know, even in the Sauer report, it says that the current condition of the field is safe, but that we are having to do maintenance that goes beyond standard. Do we have a sense of, obviously, there is going to be an expected amount for maintenance that we would pay as a matter of course every year. Do we have a sense of what our maintenance is costing above the average because of the condition of the field?
Like, here's what's happened.
Yeah.
For the first 8 years that we've had this turf, the turf has been under warranty.
Yeah, oh, okay.
So we haven't really had to pay anything for those first 8 years. Every time it needed to be fixed, they came back and they fixed it at no additional cost. In the 9th year, we spent a little over $4,000 making repairs to the turf and fixing seams that had pulled apart and divots that had occurred. Last year, the field was in actually much, much worse condition. But we were doing the upper practice field at the same time. So we asked AstroTurf if they would come down, and they, at their own expense, hoping that we would give them a project, volunteered their guys for 2 full days. They had 10 guys down on the turf working, repairing, reseaming, sewing, putting in patches and things like that, for which they never charged us to make those repairs. So that's the 10-year period.
Yeah. That's good information, thank you.
Mr. Marciniak, can you lay out what you think the timeline would be for taking this information, going to bid,
Yeah.
and on?
It's a good question, Ms. Capucci, and it's kind of critical. Turf companies right now are scheduling their men to do schools. And as I was talking to Mr. Lynch before, there's more fields than there are work crews. So it's kind of critical that we get in now or soon, so that the company that would be selected could schedule their guys, could pre-order the materials, they could manufacture our turf for our field and get it here so that we could begin right after the graduation occurs on the turf, and that we would be ready to go for the beginning of fall sports. This particular, because we're doing the track also, we would actually like to begin as soon as,
They would look at May 15th, Ms. Capucci, which is the day after the Whitfield Championship meeting. So any kids that would be successful enough to go on a state, we would move them over to Jefferson for that last week. But this would allow them to come in and shave down the current track. And again, and then they would come in to put in the new rubber. All that would be completed before graduation. So those last couple weeks, if we need to move lacrosse up to the upper practice field, we can. And for that last couple days, we would move, I think it's 3 days, we'd move those track kids over to Jefferson. This would allow us to do a big bulk of the track work, have that completed, come in then after graduation, do the turf, and then they would come in and put the final layer on the track and line it. So the hope would be, and what I believe we spec, correct me if I'm wrong, is everything would be completed by August 9th. Football heat acclimatization starts on the 10th this year, and all fall sports start on the 17th.
Marching band starts the beginning of August also, so all of those activities use it. So for graduation, this was something critical to Mr. Thompson, to make sure that parents weren't coming down to an ugly sight. The only thing that would look different would just be a black track rather than that terracotta colored track that we have down there. For graduation.
Thompson wasn't here when we were doing construction, and we had
Yes.
to walk through mud puddles to get there. So it'd be nothing. So you can get a bid out and get bids back in time, you think?
Yeah, certainly, and so that's what would be our next step, would be to put it out for bid and then to bring those numbers back to the board for approval.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
And is it during that bidding process also that those companies would discuss, I guess, the quality of the fiber if we are going to that sort of slit, that's what you're putting into the specifications?
What we're specifying currently, it's a blend system, so it's a monofilament with what they call slit film. Slit film breaks apart at the top portions of the fiber to kind of
What we have on the upper
replicate
field, the rock
real
bottom.
grass. It'll be the same product or specifications as your upper field product
Okay.
is currently.
And would we also then be going with another crumb and sand infill?
Yes.
Is that this-
At the current moment, that's how we have the infill spec'd.
Anyone else?
Is the new filament technology more durable or better performing?
Better performing. You'll still carry the 8-year warranty. Sometimes we can get them to go up to 10 years. They're just not increasing their warranties yet as the product is the product's a long way from 10 years ago currently. So you're seeing more playability, better ball reactions from these newer products, as well as overall GMAX safety numbers. The fields are, we go underneath the recommended GMAX for the life of your field. Currently, they still have it set at about 200, which is very high. We like to keep ours 165 and below for the life of your field. And that just kind of gives everyone a sense of ease knowing that your GMAX is going to be a little lower. So the products are getting there, the warranties are not.
The recyclable materials, you talked about the loose rubber and the sand from the field being recyclable and pending Meadville's ability to recycle the turf, maybe?
Correct.
What about the milled material that's going to come off of the track and that surrounding, that ground up rubber, is that acceptable at the Meadville plant?
For the running track, that can go to more of I believe, a standard recycler where they'll melt it back down and send it off. But I can look into that and make sure our spec language has
Would include
the
disposing of
recycling
that?
of,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And all of our disposal is a DEP-approved facility. Now, that doesn't mean they'll recycle it, but they are held to a standard of where they have to at least take it if it cannot be recycled. So I'll double check that in the specification.
And obviously, this is a little bit out of the scope of what you guys do, but, I mean, obviously, since it's a related industry, I mean, do you have any visibility about the timing or likelihood of Meadville's ability to process the turf material?
The one facility that was mentioned earlier that's in Europe is currently the only one, and I went and we met with that gentleman who's currently trying to get one into Philadelphia or Baltimore. He's been working on just allowing them to say yes or no for about 5 years. So I don't have a good window of time. I would hope they would start approving them because it's a need. And I think it will help the industry in general and the environment to have these facilities. But currently, years, maybe 2, 3. I'm hoping that gets turned around a little more.
Okay, so next steps at this point are, we would have to put this out for bid. And it's something we need to vote on. So I'm just going to take a quick pulse. Is everybody okay or not okay? Please let me know with moving this forward to send out to bid. We're not making any permanent decisions here. All we're doing is sending it out for the different turf companies to say how much it's going to cost. Does anybody have a problem with that? Okay, so can we move that forward next week
So,
for the
Ms.
agenda?
Albrecht, we'll put that on as an action item for next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, John. Thank you,
Thank you.
Joel.
Okay. And last on the agenda?
Would you like me to do, Dr. Diamond? Okay. The policy committee did meet tonight. We reviewed 3 policies, DFAA, ECE, and JJF. The committee made some changes to them that we'll be bringing forward to the board. I think you did see some red line and blue line copies, and the committee asked that we move those through for approval for next week. I should mention that policy DFAA, we had some significant discussion about the use of surplus funds. Just want to assure the board that this does not change any of the board's operating practices and would not require any millage increase, or it does not change the amount of fund balance that we would be maintaining. So we had quite a good discussion about the use of surplus funds tonight. And we'll give the board some additional information about how much surplus or additional funds that we have in our budget, and we'll get those in the packet this week.
Great. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Questions or comments from residents? Presentations or comments are to be limited to 5 minutes.
Hi, Chris Slater from 140 Skylark Circle. Just to follow up on the turf, I understand we have the equipment to take care of maintain the turfs. I just wonder if that's being included in the warranties costs. Because if we can do it ourselves, maybe that could be a reduction in the bid price. The other thing is, I have a question about number of fibers per square foot. Do they vary in product manufacturers or different grades of turf? The more fibers there are maybe per square foot, as to me, it stands to reason that it would last longer, potentially longer, and maybe be a better surface to play on. But that's all for today.
As far as equipment, equipment is used just to fluff up the turf. I know that's not a technical term, fluff up. It's not meant to deep clean or do something like that. We have to bring the company in. So this just is a machine that kind of fluffs up. And we would be able to use our current machine with that field, right, Rick?
That's correct.
And fibers per square foot, that's a pretty technical question, Mr. Slater. I don't have off the top of my head, but we can make sure that we get that information to you the next time we see you.
Okay. Upcoming public meetings. We have January 20th, 2020 at 7:30 PM in this very room for our regular meeting.
Yep.
February 10th, 2020 at 7:30 PM in this very room. And February, we do take a 2-week break in between board meetings, and it will be February 24th at 7:30 PM in this very room, D205. I'd also like to announce that the board met in executive session this evening, as well as had a legal update for personnel. Oh, yeah, the executive session was for personnel, sorry. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.